instead of building a quick exit B2B SaaS that leaves no cultural significance behind, uh, I'm going to build an entertainment brand, or like Arthur Guinness, I'm going to build a beer that lasts for hundreds of years, right? So
Well, welcome back to Civically Minded, where I give you practical theology for everyday life. As always, I'm your host, Corey Wing. Did you know that all of my interview segments are now being added to my audio podcast on Apple and Spotify? Simply search for Civically Minded and enjoy solid Christian content on your long commute, while you're at work or the gym, or wherever you prefer to listen to your podcast. And be sure to tell a friend how they too can enjoy Civically Minded. And if you enjoy my content, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Well, my guest today is the visionary CEO and founder of Lore TV, a groundbreaking streaming platform empowering indie filmmakers to produce and fund movies and television shows. He's a seasoned Christian filmmaker himself. He's directed documentaries like Babies Are Murdered Here and Pro-Life Spider-Man. I've seen him work alongside Pastor Jeff Durbin, Pastor Doug Wilson. He's been a guest on the Blaze TV, the Eric Metaxas Show, Cross Politic, Eschatology Matters, Theology Applied with Joel Webbin, and many, many more. He's made the rounds, so to speak. He's also collaborated on projects with Kirk Cameron, disrupting mainstream media with bold storytelling that always glorifies God. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome for the first time to Civically Minded, Marcus Pittman. Marcus, thank you for being with us today.
thanks for having me on, Corey. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited to get to kind of talk to you about what it is you do. I've got a local friend here in my own church who's a Christian filmmaker and just made his first short film about a year ago, and about 18, 19 minutes in length, and they've been taking it through all of the film festival stuff, and not just Christian film festivals, secular Christian film festivals all over
Yeah.
the country, and they've won a number of selections, and it's been really exciting to see
What's the
that
name of the
up
movie?
close and personal. The name of the director is a gentleman by the name of Mark Anthony Masame, and he's made a movie called Reviled.
Okay.
So yeah, I should hook the two of you up. Actually, you
Yeah.
probably have a
Yeah.
ton
I'd
to
love to
talk
talk
about.
to him.
So
Yeah.
we'll have to do that offline. But that's the first time I've got to see something like that so up close, and it's really been amazing to see how much, even for something short like that, even for an 18, 19-minute short film, how much work and time and effort and money goes into making something that is quality. I mean,
Right.
and I was blown away to watch the whole process. So it's been an honor to kind of sit on the. We got invited to the red carpet event here we're in the Charlotte area, so we got invited to the red carpet event at one of the local theaters here in Charlotte, and it was a chance to get all dressed up, and it was like, wow, this is real, this is cool. So it's neat to
Don't be
see
lured.
something.
Don't be lured by those red carpets, man.
Well, I'm not.
No,
Only in a world that I don't understand. So it's more
yeah.
than the novelty of what, like, wow, this is something I don't understand at all. So it's really neat to see it happen. The first
Yeah.
time I met you, I was just saying to you offline, the first time I actually met you, I was an attendee with my father-in-law at the 2023 Fight Laugh Feast conference in Kentucky, there at the Ark Encounter. And you had a booth set up there in the exhibit hall, and I was introduced to this concept of Lore TV, and to you yourself as the CEO and founder of that. And I mean, honestly, just the whole project was I didn't know how to take it. I mean, I'd never heard of anything really quite like it. I mean, and that, of course, there's Angel Media now that does famously does The Chosen and other projects as well. And
They
there's
did do they're not doing The Chosen anymore, but they did do
oh,
it. Yeah.
and I did not realize that. So that's, yeah, you've already taught me something. But they have a media platform of types, and so now there have been a couple kind of initial offerings into that kind of a space, but yours was the first one I'd ever even heard of doing anything like that. And
Yeah.
so I got to say, Laura is such an audacious project that it really does kind of make me hopeful for the future of Christian media and our ability to contribute to the larger cultural conversation that's going on here in America. So if you could explain to the audience kind of what the vision of Lore TV is, and how you go about kind of accomplishing that vision. I know that's a large question, so it may take a little time to answer, and that's okay. I'd love to hear, as the founder and CEO, kind of What brought this on?
Yeah, so the really what Lore TV is a way for independent filmmakers to get funding and distribution directly from the audience. That's the main thing. And so basically the premise was in how do we decentralize the film industry, and basically get rid of gatekeepers. And so you have, studio executives that are gatekeepers, but now, you have algorithms that are almost a worse taskmaster than 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 uh than regular Hollywood studio executives. So we found that a lot of filmmakers were tired of uh like just like you said, like the film festival circuit, all that work that goes into just getting your film out there. It's completely outdated means to do that now with the internet. What you need is you need to be able to just put your film out there and get the money for it, without having to go through all those hoops and, Epstein planes and Diddy parties. You just put your movie out there and see if it's, because that's how you know if it's valuable. A movie isn't valuable because an executive thinks it's valuable. It's valuable if the audience thinks it's valuable. The executive can make a guess as to the value of your film, but the best way to know the value. This is a biblical economic theory. Is the best way to know the value of art is whether or not people pay for it, right?
Yeah.
And so if you just get rid of the Hollywood executives, if you get rid of the algorithmic requirements to even find get your content seen by an audience, um, uh, and you just have the audience and the filmmaker on in one place. That's the best way to get your entertainment funded and your vision funded, and the audience can see it and be a part of it. And so that's really the premise of Lore. And just the way it works is you subscribe, and then every week you get what we call loot, which are just credits that you can allocate towards projects that you like. And once a project receives 100% of the credits it needs to fund, we write the artist a check and stream the show, or in some cases it goes into production, with episode by episode or project by project. So that's it. Basically, I see Lore as just an online film festival. Uh, so I just see Lore as an online film festival for uh, that's 24/7. It just never ends. It's 24/7 online film festival where films, movies, TV shows, short films, sketches, short animated cartoons are just being presented to the audience, and the audience can decide what they want to fund or not. And then of course you don't have to subscribe to fund. If there's a project you really care about or really like, you can go and buy a bunch of loot and put it towards that project. We just implemented that over the past few months, and that's helped funding increase a lot too. So
Nice. Now, is this strictly a Christian platform as far as these are only,
no,
okay. Yeah, and
no,
again, just curious.
yeah, no. The Christian film executives has so destroyed the concept of what a Christian film is, or more specifically, like a faith-based film. That whole category, it's absolute. It's a nonsense marketing retail category. It's not rooted in any theological
Yeah.
position. It doesn't mean your filmmakers are Christian. It doesn't mean it has no meaning other than where this sits on the shelf in a video store, which don't exist now. But for example, most all the movies and TV shows that were made, well, not even really TV shows, most all the Christian movies that were made with the idea of, okay, once this is out of the theaters, where are we going to sell the DVDs? And so they realized they were going to sell the DVDs at Lifeway Christian bookstores, Family Christian bookstores,
Which
and
don't exist anymore.
the target shopper of those stores were 35-year-old middle-aged women,
Yeah.
with kids. They call actually have a name for, the actual industry term is, bookstore Betty or bookstore Becky. One it's Betty or Becky, but that is the persona in which all Christian entertainment, whether it's movies, music, or books, are marketed towards women. So naturally, Christian faith-based films became very Hallmark driven, very feminine oriented, women oriented, because that was the target audience of these bookstores. That's why K Love is very feminine.
Yep.
Right, everything is. That's how Beth Moore rose to popularity. Just that whole women driven media of the Christian industry. And so our when we started, we did start by wanting to be a Christian, specifically Christian film company, but we saw that brand was so polluted. And then you say, hey, we have this great Christian movie. It's a B horror trauma style horror film, like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, or some of those
Yeah.
older Sharknado, and people go, that doesn't. I've never seen it. How does that make sense? And we realize, you just say scripture. You just go, any good story is a Christian story, whether it's horror or whatever. And so so now our main focus is really just finding great artists that want to tell great stories. And we have obviously a Christian backbone and Christian standards, but there's so much happening in the world right now on a broader scale that it just makes sense to just what Christians need to build is not. It was actually the CEO of Maddox at that Fight Laugh Feast festival that actually said this. He said we don't need to build Christian brands; we just need to build good brands.
Yeah.
And we need to be thinking in terms of how do you build billion-dollar companies and not niche Christian, here's our reform version of something, right? Like we always want to attach a reform name or confession to our company, as a means to, uh, really, it isolates the rest of the world, and it only goes after one very specific audience, which is way too small to support your family or employees on, for the most part. And
Yeah, it
so
it is amazing, that, it's I'll use online content creation. There's a fine line to be drawn in this online content creation world of, know your audience, try to make content that your audience enjoys, and wants to keep coming back for, and try to broaden the tent enough to where you're attracting new audience members, but staying faithful to the original audience. There is an incredible line there to be dynamic tension that has to be walked. And I'll be honest, I feel like I'm not succeeding at it most of the time. And I come from a background in the music world. I toured as a young man, and kind of semi-professionally, um, as a musician, but again, in quote
what
Christian
genre?
music. Again,
Okay,
Christian rock and
Christian
roll.
music.
But
Okay, yeah,
I'm of the age where that was a real thing. So I mean,
yeah,
I'm 47 years old. So this was in the 90s, when Christian music was like on MTV. I mean,
you're
and
right.
and so I mean,
Well, yeah,
Christian music was
Tooth
having a
and Nail
moment.
Tooth and Nail
Yes.
Records is a great example of a brand that was Christian, but wasn't in the categories, in
Yep.
the retail categories specifically. There's a really great podcast called, I think it's called Unlabeled, and it's the history of Tooth and Nail Records. And they were doing punk rock shows, in church basements, and
Yeah, Value Pack, MXPX,
yeah,
Goatee Hook,
that's
huge.
right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, great bands,
Yeah.
incredible bands. Yeah.
Yeah, incredible bands, and those bands have left generational music. Whereas you don't really see that. We were talking to a guy. I think he's written at least. I mean, I could be wrong, but at least 300 Christian songs. We were in a cigar lounge in Franklin, Tennessee, and this guy was in there, and he was telling us about all these Christian songs that he's written. Like, you would know their names. He ghostwrites for for most of the songs. He couldn't even tell us what he wrote because he's bound by NDAs and ghostwriting. But
Yeah.
you would definitely recognize the music. But it was interesting is he said that really every Christian artist, they only really make a lot of money if they write a hymn. Right, so
Mhm.
something that's strong or theological, but like the Hillsong sort of stuff, he was saying that, like, it's, like, top 10 for a week and then just goes away, but then if you're someone like, what's the name of the Irish,
The Gettys.
husband
Yeah,
the
Keith and
Gettys.
Kristen Getty, yeah.
Yeah, so Keith and Kristen Getty make these hymns that last generationally, and they're
Mhm.
not so, I think what could be brought out there is there, there's an objective standard of what good Christian music is, and it's not it's not the typical Hillsong sort of stuff, that
Bethel, Elevation,
that the
it's not that
radio's
stuff. Yeah,
pushing, yeah,
yeah.
that for that week, right? So that was really interesting insight as well, but I think one of the things we look back on, we look at VeggieTales, for example, that was probably $1 billion company, if you include the merch and stuff. You can look back, maybe at, Adventures in Odyssey,
Mhm.
is, been around for 30 years now, probably. And then you have a lot. I mean, during the '90s, you just had this immense, basically Christian pop culture that transcended
Yeah.
out of the mainstream. So it is possible to do it, but my theory, and and well, not really a theory. I've spoken to executives in the Christian industry, is they kind of rein that back. you know, like it got really big, and they're like, and it was almost like, ooh, we don't want to do that, and we want to mainly keep the Christian audience away from mainstream culture. This is secular entertainment, right? Secular entertainment goes, whoa, 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 you guys can't interfere with our profits. So we don't want to, that's what happened with Passion of the Christ, one of the top grossing movies ever,
Mhm.
right? And then basically no one in Hollywood was like, oh, we should do that again. All Hollywood does is sequels and remakes. But they weren't like, "Hey, maybe we should do some more movies like Passion of the Christ because it made $600 million." Instead, it was complete blacklist of anybody involved in the projects and basically wiped away. It wasn't because the movie didn't make money, it was because it made money and it scared them, and they were like, "We cannot have Christian movies be good." So we'll specifically, through executive decrees, make them in this cheesy Hallmark format and just kind of keep them at Lifeway Christian bookstores. People always say, "Oh, well, the Christian movies are bad because they don't have money or they don't have good actors. That there's not good talent out there." It's not true. It's all executive decisions that restrict Christian films from being good on purpose. You're being played,
Mm.
and you're buying into the narrative that they don't have money. And just to explain how stupid that is, every Christian movie, probably apart from the angel stuff, but even some with the angel stuff, are distributed through Lionsgate Entertainment or DreamWorks or Sony, right? Right. So they have the money. They're working with the same companies
That's right.
that's putting up money to share the profits on it, but they don't want the Christian movies to compete on the same weekends as Superman, right? Like you know what I mean? So they limit it, and then they make sure that not good. It's not good on purpose. And you
Because
talk to a
Christian
lot.
movies, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Christian movies historically, if they come to theaters, actually do quite well. I mean, from
Yeah,
what I've seen.
especially well, the good ones do really well. So the ones that are produced well, the ones that kind of circumvent the typical distribution systems, They do really well. Then you have the Christian movies, as example, God's Not Dead, for example.
Yeah. 13.
We don't really know how good those movies do. If I had to guess, they probably don't do as good as reported, because what they did was they created a basically they realized that uh, if they can get a pastor of a church to buy 300 movie tickets and give the tickets out for free, they don't have to appeal to everybody. So then they only need to make movies that are for the pastor, that the pastor will approve of and not be embarrassed of if his whole church is watching it. So basically, you can't. Pureflix had this whole system really where they would just market and target pastors, and pastors would buy 300 churches. It would be called this evangelistic event, and then opening weekend this movie would do really well, be one or number one or number two. But I think if you were to actually like look at the people that actually went and bought tickets besides the pastor, the movie wouldn't do well at all. So it's kind of like a grift.
Yeah.
But and that's why a lot of those movies are forgotten, and your grandkids aren't going to care about them. You're not going to watch, those movies with your grandkids and stuff like that, because they're basically memes. The movies are, they have that quick sort of hit of, wow, they had a great weekend, opening weekend, and then the very next weekend there's just no one's there.
So again,
And
for my audience, we're talking and I'm not trying to pick on anybody because again, I've seen a lot of these films. We're talking War Room, we're talking Courageous, I mean,
Yeah. So
again,
those
like,
movies specifically are marketed and targeted towards pastors,
yeah,
and then the pastors buy out the theater. And so, Angel started to do this with the pay it forward stuff too, where you could buy tickets for people to go watch the movie for free. But again, like I said, like the value of art is whether people are willing to pay their own money for it. And so if you have a bunch of people that are going to the theater and they're just watching a movie for free, it doesn't really give us a good economic uh like economically, based on the laws of economics, we can't really tell how good of a movie it is, because it's a charity at that point.
yeah,
It's a
there's no real
nonprofit.
barometer that's measuring anything there. It's
Right.
just now I remember again, come from a music world, so all of my paradigm's going to come from that background. I remember when Radiohead did this in the music space for the first time I want to say it was in the late 90s, maybe the early 2000s, where they self-produced and they released an album on their website and you could download it for free or you could donate, whatever amount you wanted. And what was shocking was they made more money on that album than any of their previous albums like Kid A or, OK Computer. I mean, which were huge hit albums
Yeah.
I still enjoy, albums I still listen to, you know, and they broke in some ways forever. They broke the music industry and their, just crippling death stranglehold on not so much us as the audience, though that's true, on the artist, that artists were saying, well, but we want to make albums like this. And if you're watching this and you think, well, what do you mean by that? If you watch the biopic pick on Queen that came out a few years back, and there's that wonderful scene where they're sitting trying to talk about releasing their magnum opus hit, Bohemian Rhapsody, and the executive who's played by Mike Myers is like, no, no one wants this sweeping,
Right.
long, ridiculous. He wants a pop hit, as they say, formulaically a pop hit. And in that instance, the band had already built so much capital that they had the ability to push back a little bit. But young artists, whether in music or film or television, they don't have that kind of capital built up. So I mean,
Right.
it's impossible for them to break in and say, here's something we're super passionate about. And we've seen it work on a micro scale. We're having, 100, 200, 400 people show up to our shows, or to, watch whatever it is we're putting out on YouTube or, or whatever. And then those gatekeepers, as you've been saying, really kind of say, Yeah, well, it's us you have to convince. So I love
Right.
the idea that you're giving the public the opportunity to say, no, we're going to fund stuff that we find valuable. That's incredible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really that's really the goal. Like postmodern art. Um, you have just a few influencers in the postmodern art world. And you can strap a banana to a wall with duct tape and sell it for $30 million. But
Yeah.
that's not the real economic. Like that's inflate. That's inflated. That's not true. And so a lot of that is, I mean, a lot of that happens at a pretty grand scale. And so what we're just trying to do is just trying to basically take the laws of economics and apply that to art and whatnot. And really, I mean, really, the main thing is just getting Christians' mindset into the value of investing in stories and art, not as nonprofits or not as evangelistic things, but actually as a like these are valuable businesses. Because you can see it in the conservative MAGA world too, where you'll have these guys who are always like, oh, conservatives don't invest in media, conservatives don't invest in this, and they're absolutely right. Like there's not like we conservatives don't value story as a means to propagate their ideas. So Ben Shapiro has the worst line, the worst line possible, which is facts don't care about your feelings, right? But that makes sense. Of course, facts are facts apart from your feelings. But the real truth is that feelings don't care about facts,
That's
especially
right.
so when you look at the left is very feeling based, emotional based, story driven, right? So they'll put homosexuals in movies and TV shows, like Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? They're putting a homosexual couple in their new TV series right now, and the goal is that you watch this show and you're like, oh, they are real people, you know, right?
Yeah.
And so after 10 years of uh, that sort of programming, you have a whole generation that doesn't really care whether that's natural or not, because they've been emotionally driven through storytelling of these heroic homosexual fathers in 10 years of storytelling, that it's really hard for you to be able to come out and say, yeah, no, 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 that's immoral. Um uh because you've been, and that's what they did before, Obergefell with gay marriage. They Is 20 years of homosexuals in movies and television before they were able to get that passed. And so that's how the left makes laws, is through storytelling. And then conservatives come and say, well, we're just going to say what's true and nobody cares. Right? It's left is presuppositional in that sense, where they basically, the facts don't really matter. I mean, s- so what I mean is, conservatives are evidential. So they're like, well, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at these data and charts and sheets and stuff, and and the left kind of goes presuppositional and says, yeah, but you should care about people, right?
Yeah.
And then they imply that, and so they're using the emotions of an image bearer and manipulating those through stories, whereas we just go, well, we're just going to convert people with facts. Well, you can do that, but the MAGA movement, the conservative movement, everything that's kind of going on right now is very, very temporary. You look at like this amazing Gen Z shift that Turning Point has done a phenomenal job in,
Hmm.
like, taking and turning campuses conservative, really. But that's going to be lost if there's not a cultural anchor, right? If that doesn't lead to investment in storytelling, if that doesn't lead to investment in art and music, then it's gonna go by the wayside. So a great example of this is like MTV came out in the 70s, 80s. Um, you had these liberal ideas, that were kind of like behind the scenes, sort of like they weren't really nobody was really mainstream during this time. These ideas weren't mainstream political ideas, but then you had bands and musicians and art and culture on the forefront during MTV that was espousing these ideas, and that solidified it generationally. Like that, like it was like once MTV came about, um, those ideas weren't going to be leaving anytime soon. So conservatives put a lot of effort, and Charlie Kirk is really great at debating kids and on college campuses and stuff like that. But unless there's this creative movement that's backed and invested in, um, and for profit, and successful for profit. Uh, those ideas are going to be quickly lost based on whatever the next great idea is. You right. Uh, so I was listening to, um, I think it was Andrew Schultz, who's a comedian, and he was talking about his support for Trump or whatever. And what he was saying was, "Well, I didn't become a conservative." This is the actual words. He says, "I didn't become a conservative. Conservatives became Democrats." That's what he said. And the Democrats became radicalized communists, right? And I think he's right. It's but my thought was, well, what's going to happen when the next Trump is a leftist, right? Um,
Yeah.
so so without being grounded in generational storytelling, uh, it's all the work we're doing is just it's gonna go away in probably less than 10 years.
Well, and to kind of anchor that in some history, again, just within my own lifetime, I remember the first show, and it probably was even on early reruns when I was a boy. But I remember the first show that kind of started to flirt with these ideas was an old show called Three's Company, you know, and if for a ton of the audience who's too young to remember that show, doesn't know anything about it, it was a man living with two women, and it was scandalous because a man shouldn't live with two women. That's immoral. And this was
Right.
in the 70s. So I mean that was still considered immoral. So he pretended to be homosexual, which somehow made it less scandalous. But and the Mr. Roper, who was the guy that owned the building, was always, thinking, "Oh my goodness, this guy's a homosexual, but at least he's not attracted to these two women he's living with." And I mean, that or Bosom Buddies, which was an early Tom Hanks show where he was
Right.
playing, where he was dressed up in drag. I mean, these are some of the first forays into
Yeah.
pushing that narrative more
Right.
strongly. I mean, you can go
Over
back to
time.
some. Yeah, right. You can go back to some like a hot. I mean, there were other cross-dressing things even way, way back. But I
Yeah.
mean, though that was when they really started to enter your episodic, kind of weekly stuff where it was going to
Yeah.
be entering into the zeitgeist of American culture. And I remember my grandparents and their generation were so scandalized by Three's Company. I mean, they picketed, they wrote letters to the same studio heads that you're talking about, and
Yeah.
it didn't do anything. I mean, the show became
No.
a mega hit, and became a huge hit for the two young ladies and the gentlemen that were the stars, who again I would mention, but none of you that watch are old enough to remember any of this. So but so to give credence to what you're talking about, this has been going on for decades. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
long, long time. And kind of on the juxtaposition, other side of what you're talking about with the Charlie Kirk stuff, and who I support, who I think is doing great work. I oftentimes think of Paul before King Agrippa, where Paul passionately delivers the gospel, but because the gospel must be driven home by the Holy Spirit, we cannot convert people. The Holy
Right.
Spirit must convert people. Agrippa looks at one of the greatest pastors and preachers, maybe the greatest evangelist of all time, save Christ, and says, almost. You have convinced me to believe the gospel. And I fear that that's kind of what you're talking about is,
Right.
we're getting all of these young people or even young middle-aged people to go, almost, you've convinced me to, have a Christian worldview or to be more conservative or, you know, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. If we don't ground that in something more transcendent, then it lasts for, if we're lucky, one generation, and then it's just dust in the wind, and it'll go
Right.
to the next thing.
Right. Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. But the problem is, as I've been speaking to venture capitalists and investors and stuff, the conservative mindset behind investment is going to build something and then you're going to sell it and then you're going to get your return on your investment, right?
Mhm.
Or you're going to build something and then uh, uh, but it's going to be built very quickly and the returns are going to be very quick. And that's good investment strategy. But the left invests in stuff that's a 20 or 30-year plan, right? Like, I mean, like, look at, like, all the investment, like, so if you look at, like, AI, for example, is a
Mhm.
great example of this, conservatives are like, "Oh, we need a seat at the moderation table," right? And it's like, "Yeah, but where were you in the '90s when they were experimenting with LLMs for the very first time? And where were you in 2018 where the transistor model for LLMs came into effect that allowed this modern AI stuff? Where was y'all's money then? This was happening way back in the, I mean, like, computers were basically just becoming mainstream and they're already on LLMs and investing money in this sort of stuff. And then now we look back and go, oh, why don't Christian, AI is bad. Like, so, like, that's our first response is like AI is bad and it could be demon possessed. Like, I mean, I heard the craziest stuff about AI, and and none of these positions matter because you guys have no financial interest. You guys are not shareholders. You're not major shareholders for sure. And you have Sam Altman, who's basically using this powerful, almost nuclear bomb in terms of technology. And we have we we're just outside critics.
Yeah.
That's a really dangerous position to be in. But I don't think you could convince a conservative investor, hey, invest in this thing. And this is how we see it maybe 20 or 30 years from now. But we got to start investing in it now. Like, I don't think you could convince conservatives that. And then you look at, like, MTV is a great example of, people who they wrote millions of dollars for this idea of a music television channel that had no customers, no consumer base. It was just an idea. And not only that, this is the thing people don't understand. Like, music videos didn't even exist when MTV started. Like, there was, like, I think when they, on day one when they launched, there was only like 100 music videos that they had and they just had on loop. And then what happened was bands saw it, started making their own music videos in their garage and sending them to MTV, and MTV was just so happy to have a new music video that they would just play it. And so all these bands sort of, and you got punk rock and stuff that really blew up out of that because it was all garage people, bands in garages, sort of in basements, sort of thing. Just this idea of, like, visionary investing is like, we're going to invest in something. We might lose everything, uh, uh, but we're gonna we're gonna build something out that if it succeeds could have generational impact. And now, of course, MTV is insanely valuable, but its value is based on its longevity through culture, right?
As
Same thing
same as
with
like SNL, right? I mean, so when
Yeah,
SNL
SNL,
started,
you cannot put a price on SNL. Like,
no.
there's no SNL is one of my favorite shows that I've studied and researched. And you have Lorne Michaels, who says, like, we're gonna take college age kids uh, from dusty improv clubs all over
Yeah.
the country. We're gonna go around. We're gonna scout it out. We're gonna find these guys. We're gonna put them on stage, and they're gonna have to do it live, and they're gonna fail, and they're gonna bomb, and they're gonna suffer, and it's gonna be the most miserable experience of their lives. And 90% of all the sketches do really terrible. And every generation thinks the generation that came of SNL cast was better than the current one.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, the SNL cast is the SNL cast of that generation. It's just always that way. And people leave, but for there isn't a single uh space in the entire past 50 years of comedy culture that hasn't been uh, that hasn't come within the somehow that's come in within the SNL sphere of Lorne Michaels, right? So I mean,
They're the Beatles of comedy. I mean, as far
yeah.
as you talk about every modern band, you can trace
Well,
back to the Beatles.
Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler, Rob
Mike
Schneider,
Myers, yep,
Mike Myers,
Jimmy Fallon, yep,
and then the guys that auditioned for Saturday Night Live but didn't make it. So Jim Carrey, for example, didn't make it, and then went on to do In Living Color, right? But everything, like all of comedy culture, comes from this one
yep.
thing. And it's easy to look up at its present state. I'll give you an example. For example, like you can look at the present state and go, these guys are not good. Michael Shea, Colin Jost, for example, they do Weekend Update currently, right?
Mhm,
When
mhm.
they're the longest running Weekend Update hosts in the history of Saturday Night Live. Uh, they weren't that good, not very memorable, and now they're great.
They're hysterical. Yeah, that's right, they're
Right?
hysterical
They're
now. Yep,
absolutely phenomenal. They do that race swap
yep,
jokes.
yep. Where they always
What they do,
try to find something that's gonna make the other guy
yeah,
crazy uncomfortable. Yeah,
yeah, they do. I mean, like it's just absolutely. I mean, they're well polished, but it took, I think, maybe 10 years of
yeah.
them. I don't know how many seasons they've been on it, but let's as 10 years. It took multiple seasons of them just failing and failing and failing and failing, and that's why that show has to be live, right? So
Well,
that
Norm
like that show.
Macdonald to me is always the consummate example of that. Norm wasn't appreciated almost until he left the show, and now in his death, people are going, "Man, Norm Macdonald was a flipping genius."
He was
You
the
know, and
greatest of all time.
Norm
Uh,
Norm Macdonald was a flipping genius, but he
yeah,
was so risque, he was so out there that his comedic timing, his kind of odd delivery, none of it was appreciated in the moment. You know, it was just
yeah,
kinda,
and he
no one
was
knew what to do with
fired. It was fired because he took the position that OJ did murder those people, right? Which now you
it. Yeah.
look back and go, man, he was absolutely right
Prophetic.
about.
Yeah, absolutely
But the
prophetic.
NBC executive was friends with OJ, so he had to go, right? So, and now that's seen as one of the worst moves of all time. Even like Conan O'Brien, when he first got started, the first few years of late night. Well, first off, with Conan O'Brien, nobody knew who he was. Lorne Michaels went to NBC and said, "I have this writer. He's writing for The Simpsons. He's doing all these. He's written for Saturday Night Live. He's written for The Simpsons. He's your next great late night TV host." And nobody knew who he was. Like everybody was like, "Why would you pick someone that no one's ever heard of?" You know, and so he did that show, and the first few years was absolutely awful. And Lorne Michaels still went to the NBC executives and was like, "He's your guy. Be patient with him." And so they renewed his contract for the show in 6-week increments. There was like they just didn't know if they were going to get renewed, or it was like 2 week. I mean, it was like
Wow.
they were on and then but what happened was, because they thought they were going to lose the show anyway, they just did what they wanted. And that just became this sort of like, I mean, Conan is one of the greatest talk show hosts of all time. Probably it's probably Carson and Conan. I think, in terms of like that's where I would put my top two. And then and then you had this whole shift where he took over the night show. That was a big disaster, and then he went and did the TBS show, and now did a podcast and sold that podcast for $50 million, which is really funny because that's exactly how much I believe his contract with NBC was for the late night show. So, and that was just for the podcast. And now he's doing, of course, the Conan must go. I mean, and then he just won the Mark Twain Award for I mean, like he's the greatest of all time. But it was because he had that time to develop in front of an audience for years that nobody has anymore. So now what happens is executives look on YouTube and TikTok and they find all these guys, Mr. Beast, for example, and then Amazon Prime comes and offers Mr. Beast $100 million to do his own show. And people watch it and go, this is just like a really long YouTube video, right? Because Mr. Beast is always, if he studied the algorithm, so he's always very much a watch to the end, or just wait till you see this, or wait till you see this. Well, could you imagine doing like a movie or TV show that interrupts and breaks the fourth wall, and it's like, well, just wait till the end. It's gonna, right? Like the story should carry.
Only Deadpool can get away with that. That's right.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So, but like that sort of, wait till the end, click like and subscribe only works for one audience member, and that's the algorithm, right? So, these guys are making entertainment for algorithms. They're not making entertainment for real people. And there's the assumption, obviously, that well, the algorithm only really works if people watch it. But the algorithm only works once you hit a certain scale. So if I were to take your friend, for example, who spent all this time on this short film, and he's been going through the circuit, he's put a lot of money, he's invested time and energy. Let's say he didn't do the circuit, and he just put it out there on YouTube. Just new account, opens account, puts it out there on YouTube. It wouldn't, no one would ever see it. No one would ever know it exists. And so that's not the people who are best at using the algorithm to get views, are not necessarily the best narrative storytellers. And so that's a very distinction, and it doesn't really allow for comedy to really find a foothold, because you have to fail publicly in front of a lot of people in order to do comedy. And that's why Christians have no comedy, because you can't go and do a joke that you go, oh, that comedian like crossed the line. That was not really a good Christian joke at a church when you're performing at a church, right? So everything has to be clean and sterilized and polished. And what you don't see are, the even the good Christian comedians are having to practice their sets in bars and comedy clubs, just like everybody else, because that's the only
You're
place.
John Crist, you're Tim Hawkins, all those
Yeah,
guys.
they're doing late night comedy
Yep.
dives all over the country, and
John
open
Crist was
mic.
I was in Chattanooga for the PCA General Assembly. I ate at a little local pizza and beer joint, and they had a poster up at the door of John Crist was coming to Chattanooga in like 2 weeks, and playing at a local comedy club. And I thought, hey, John
Right.
Crist. Yeah, so I mean,
Right. So
absolutely, that's what they're doing.
by the time you see a lot of these comedy shows, they've already been all the jokes have been tested and polished for well over a year or more before you actually get a 60-minute special. So the church isn't the place for comedy to be tested, right? Uh, uh, and also the church audience is a very specific audience that doesn't really, like, they don't know how to take a bad joke. When we're the best at cancel culture, if there's a comedian who tells a joke and we're like, oh, that was a little bit too on the edge, we just never buy his stuff ever again, right?
Yeah.
And that's just you just get that it can't function on comedy. So that's why one of the things I'm excited about Lore is we really want to be a place for artists, comedians specifically, to just go and fail, and people might fund your sketch and then it wasn't that great, and then you can do another one, or they might fund your stand-up special and stuff like that. And so just really, not having those sort of boundaries on what makes good comedy or what makes bad comedy, or you've seen a comedian going, wow, that guy was like way offensive, I'll never fund that guy again. Great, that's the point of the
Yeah.
platform, is you can you the audience gets to make those sort of decisions and stuff. But
Well, but I like what you said, because that also includes things like you said earlier, of like horror or even thriller. I mean, Christian,
yeah,
the idea of like Christian horror, Christian thriller. And again, I use Christian as a label that I don't even mean that for you and I use that for the audience who's listening. That to say it's made by a Christian, maybe it's even got Christian themes. It's just really a horror movie or a thriller.
yeah,
And that's what my friend that goes to our church would say. He's like, "Look, I've made a thriller. I mean, I'm a Christian. It's got Christian themes. It's about a number of years into the future. It's kind of very not post-apocalyptic, but post-Christian world. It. But I mean, when he's audienced it or played it for Christian, solely Christian audiences, it has been, golly, it's a little dark, or and it's like,
right, yeah, you got,
but that's
but,
by design. I mean, I
yeah,
did that intentionally.
but the thing is, see, but those standards aren't realistic because the
Right.
Christians don't apply those same standards for non-Christian entertainment. They'll
Yeah.
go and watch
These
Breaking
same
Bad.
people watch Game of Thrones. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely true, right? Absolutely true. And they'll judge Game of Thrones for Game of Thrones, or they'll judge Breaking Bad for Breaking Bad. But then they judge the thriller that's made by a Christian as a Christian movie, and they don't give the same amount of grace and stuff to the Christians. And it's and Christian artists don't want to do it, and they would much rather go to Hollywood, and deal with that sort of nonsense than deal with the church audience when it comes to critiquing movies and entertainment. But again, a lot of those uh, principles, or I guess a lot of those opinions Christians have about what a Christian movie or TV show should be, are lies created by marketing executives in Hollywood studios and Christian studios to get you to like specifically only their brand of entertainment. So I think the whole Christian entertainment industry is built on like a really flimsy house of cards that they're very protective over. And so if you start making movies and TV shows that break those boundaries of Christian entertainment, the whole industry collapses on it. So it's over overnight. So it's a very simple problem to solve. The hard part is actually just raising the capital to convince people that it can be done, because uh, uh, we want to invest in things after they have traction, not
Mhm.
invest when they're early seed stage ideas.
We're conservative by definition.
Yeah,
So I mean,
right, right.
yeah,
Well, but let me ask you this, like, you know, how do you invest if your principles for investment, and this goes back to Jesus and the guy who buried his talents in the sand, and he was a coward with his how he
yeah,
invested. He was a coward, and the punishment for him was hell, right? Like,
yeah. So
so
says Revelation. All cowards will be in the lake of fire. That's
right.
right.
Well, that's a really really valuable principle for venture that we don't ever really talk about or like to talk about, because it's very easy for the venture capitalists to go, well, if you had a good idea, then you would raise money. Well, it's not I would, if I went to the left, I would have,
Yeah.
but we specifically didn't. But so when you go to the when you think about this, think about the commercial air flight, right? How do you measure the value of something that's never been how do you know that there's enough demand that people would actually want to get in a rocket and fly across an ocean, How do you, and then there's a lot of, like, there are, when plane travel first started, there was a lot more plane crashes than there are today. So you have to invest in this idea that is probably going to kill people. Like, it's not just gonna make it's gonna kill people. And
Yeah.
then but eventually it becomes, like, the world can't exist without commercial air travel at this point, right? Like, the entire world would shut down, without, that sort of thing. But you didn't know that during the time of the Wright brothers, when they were just had a glider. I think, I love that line. It was like a week before the Wright brothers' first flight. It said it would take a million. New York Times posted it would take 1,000,000 years before humans, will be able to fly. And that was a week before the Wright brothers actually flew. This was Is that right? So and the other thing too, a more modern example too, is like, what about like autonomous vehicle travel,
Yeah.
right? So think of Waymo. I think the first to do it. How do you how do you convince people, no, there actually is going to be a customer base that'll get in a car just completely on faith, and let it drive them, right? So I know Jason Farley was at a conference in Arizona, and he took a Waymo, and the Waymo dropped him off 36 blocks away from his destination, and he had to call Waymo, and Waymo sent another one because it's all new, but
Yeah.
all that investment is speculative. It's
They watched
assuming.
Total Recall, and they realized that it worked in Total Recall, I
Yeah.
mean, so
Well, right. So, but
but
like
I
all that
think
invest
that goes back to it goes back to something that I've experienced as a pastor. I'm recently teaching out of the book of Acts in Sunday school and in my adult Sunday school class, and we were just going through Acts chapter 10 and 11, where, of course, Peter's told by God in a vision to go to the house of Cornelius and to preach the gospel now to Gentiles. And so he does. Well, that ends up getting him arrested. He gets back to Jerusalem. He gets arrested by Herod, and Herod throws him into prison with the intention, it says very clearly in the text, of killing him, because they'd killed Stephen, and the people kind of loved that. So he was like, hey, you liked it when I killed Stephen. I got a guy
right,
way more important than Stephen. So I mean,
right,
just wait till I kill this guy. And so God miraculously breaks Peter out of prison. And we're told further in the text there in that chapter, I want to say that's chapter either 11 or 12 of the book of Acts, um, that because Peter is extricated from prison, the Roman guards who were guarding him were put to death. And Christians, to your point, and I know this is kind of a roundabout way to get, but I use this as an example to say we're so uncomfortable with God being over everything that we even try to make excuses for him when it's clear in scripture. So I mean, I had people in my adult Sunday school class who I said, look, for Peter to go free, what did it mean for the Romans, for the Roman centurions that were watching it? Well, they were put to death. But God didn't do that. Of course God did that.
right,
Obviously God did that. Yeah,
right,
and you can say it was by inference that God knew they would die, and he's not completely culpable for it because it was the wickedness of Herod. Well, that's true. I'm not,
right.
again, there's a theological reality that's happening, but then there is a practical reality that's happening. And I sometimes think that Christians so conflate the theological with the practical and vice versa that we don't know how to think in categories. So we want to see everything as a theological nuance when there's practical realities on the ground. And you kind of go, yep. And I'm not saying they're not connected, but guys, we got to think better than this. I mean,
Well,
can you imagine what the ancient world, even say of Europe, would have looked like? I mean, my mother and my older brother and his family are leaving on Thursday, so a couple days. They're leaving on Thursday to head to Italy. While they're in Italy, they will see churches that have been standing there for 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 years, and they'll ooh and ah, and they'll take photos, and it will be a memory they'll carry the rest of their lives. Can you imagine, however, if the people 1,200 years ago didn't have the foresight to build a building in honor unto God that none of them would see the completion of?
right.
I mean,
Well,
that took incredible faith. That took
well,
incredible
we talk about
expenditure.
Yeah, we talk about that with churches all the time. They're like, "Oh, we're building these quick build conference centers, or whatever." And then we want to get back to building, cathedrals that take hundreds of years to build. But what about businesses?
Yeah.
Right? Like, when you do that, go, "Oh, no, that's terrible." But the problem is, a lot of this is, it's not every boomer, but it's the boomer generation mentality of, "I'm just gonna build something, I'm gonna sell it, I'm gonna spend my money in my retirement, and then whatever's left over, I'm gonna give to my kid." As opposed to saying, "I'm gonna build a business, and I'm gonna train my kids how to run this business and to keep the core values of it intact, so that instead of building a quick exit B2B SaaS that leaves no cultural significance behind, uh, I'm going to build an entertainment brand, or like Arthur Guinness, I'm going to build a beer that lasts for hundreds of years, right? So, and I think he got maybe 3 or 4 generations of Guinnesses that ran St. James Gate up until, St. James Gate, he signed a 9,000-year lease on the land because the water was so valuable, in terms of, like, it was so critical towards making the Guinness taste the way it tastes. So he signed a 9,000-year lease, which you can still see to this day. They have it on the floor, sealed in acrylic, right? So, um, yeah, no Christian thinks that way anymore.
Yeah.
We get leases that are 2 years, we get leases on property that's 5 years, but no one gets a 9,000-year lease anymore, while securing the water rights. There's a story of Arthur Guinness. He needed the water. The sheriff of the area came and was going to basically take away his water rights, and him and a bunch of men went with rifles to go and stop the sheriff from taking it, and the sheriff conceded and gave gave back the water because it was so important.
Yeah.
But and I mean, you don't think? I mean, who thinks in terms of 9,000 years for your business? Like, that's insane. And then the only reason Disney and Marvel are crushing it at the box office now with everything they do is because they have 100 years of brand recognition. So
Yep.
you can go with your grandfather, your father, your son, and your grandchild to the same movie, and they all know who Disney is, or they all know who Marvel is, all of them, right? So we don't have 100-year brands. The biggest brand in terms of longevity, I think Christians can claim, is probably maybe Adventures in Odyssey in terms of a media brand, because they've been 30 years, and I think
Mm.
you probably have 2 generations now of people that have grown up listening to Adventures in Odyssey episodes. But even that's a not, like, it's a nonprofit sort of thing. So it's, I mean, Adventures in Odyssey could be way bigger than it
Yeah.
is. Than it
Again, I
is.
think of it from a pastoral space. Here we just learned yesterday of the passing of the wonderful Dr. John MacArthur, and Grace to You, which is I mean, that's a big brand.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people know what Grace to
yeah,
You is. Sadly, will probably not stick around. I mean, now I hope it does. I hope
right.
it. I hope it does. I hope someone, I hope Phil Johnson runs with it, and other men step into it. Ligonier has thankfully outlived R.C. Sproul. Some would say not nearly to the level of success that RC had it at, of
Well,
course.
both
But
of those organizations have a problem. It's that they're funded mainly by elderly people.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and so none of those organizations, Ligonier, Grace to You, have really been able to successfully bring in newer, younger um, audiences. And one of their problems is that the way they do bring up younger people is through seminary, which they wind up being pastors, which aren't high paying jobs that they could then go and reinvest or donate money to those organizations, right? So I think I think that's why people are saying those John MacArthur was, the last man. When you think of like R.C. Sproul and all those, I guess you would call it the Mediva sort of organizations. They're, they really don't, unless they can somehow figure out a way to bring in this Gen Z swell. Uh, it's going to be really difficult for them to be able to do that. And to be able to sustain. But that I mean, that's typical with, any of the major Christian organizations. They're all funded by older generations, and younger generations don't have money to be able to write $1,000 check as a charitable contribution, because that's all boomer wealth
Yeah.
from that generation that's really funding and fronting those sort of things. And then once that money gets passed off, it'll get passed off to Gen X. I mean, who know? I mean, yeah, who knows
That's me.
what's gonna.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
me.
But what's going to be passed off to Gen X is just probably just cash.
Yeah.
It's not going to be businesses and empires, and so that's a concern, I think as well. So what we need to be focusing on now, and this is what I tell investors is, the goal is to build a multi-generational brand that spans generations, so that your grandkids are reaping the rewards of your investment. And of course, that doesn't mean that if you invest, there's no exit, or there's no way to make a return when you need to, or whatever, cash out your shares or whatever. Of course, you could do that, but the ultimate goal has to be longevity in the brand,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to entertainment and media, because we want to make stories and move things in such a way that really changes the changes generations. And then the other thing too with lore is, when we started lore, there wasn't really a term for what we were doing. We didn't know. We just felt that, we look back, younger generations, they're spending money on microtransactions and in-app purchases to fund extra lives on their video games and badges and leaderboards and stuff like that. And we thought, well, maybe they'll use that same model for movies and TV shows as well. And so that was kind of the core backing of lore. And now, looking back, now the industry actually has a term for what we are, which is called GVOD, gamified video on demand. And we didn't know that term when we started. We just built based on, the way the wind was blowing. And so now there's all this discussion and talk about what a GVOD platform is. And Lore, thankfully, by God's providence, we're the first go-to-market gamified video on demand platform in the history of the world.
That's
So
awesome.
now we have a real opportunity for something that's not a Christian version of something that already exists, or a photocopy of something that already exists. There's actually an opportunity to invest in something that's completely different and first, and Christians can sort of take the reins on that, and kind of set the stage for what that looks like, and avoiding, dark funnels, which is a gamification term that, we don't want to use microtransactions to encourage gambling, right? We don't want somebody to pay $10 and they could get, 1 to 1,000 loot, or whatever, right? Like, as a gamble, right? So we
Mhm.
don't want to go the dark funnel routes for the gamification that secular people will go. Like, they will do a gamified video on demand platform that has dark funnels and stuff like that. So now it's like really important, now that we're actually the first at something, to invest in that and to propel it, and to drive it forward. And so we're in a really good position right now. We're raising money for our next round, and uh, uh, we just brought on Sean Tomlin as our chief content officer, and he was the director. Oh, not the director. He was like the founder of Fuel TV. He was a producer for MTV Sports and Games Festivals. He worked with ESPN to help them develop the X Games, and like just I think he won an Emmy last year for Wild Yellowstone on National Geographic. I mean, the guy's like just top tier senior network executive with Fox Cable, and we're really, I mean, he's really been putting in the work and
That's
prepping
awesome.
us. A lot of the stuff that's happening with Lore is behind the scenes stuff to prep us to scale to that national stage once we find the investments. A lot of exciting stuff on that end, everything is ready. The machine is built, and now it's just a matter of putting some gasoline in it. So that's been really exciting to be able to come along Sean and learn from him uh, on how to run a network at a national major scale as he's done. So
That's incredible. So kind of my tagline, as I said at the beginning, is practical theology for everyday life. So I'm going to give a takeaway. I'd love to give you the final word on kind of what practical steps you think people can take today to start taking some of the advice that you've been giving here on building something that will last. I spent 20 years in the real estate world as well. I'm still a licensed realtor. One of the ways that me and Greg Moore of Deadman Walking have connected over the years, and you, I've thought of a mutual friend of ours a lot of as you've been talking. Another guy I know that you and I both know who talks about storytelling and the importance of story all the time, which is our friend Parker Brown with the Watch
yeah,
Well podcast. Um, so there are other guys that are talking about these things. Thank God. But I, with 20 years in real estate and coming from a real estate family, my parents are both realtors. My grandparents were realtors. My wife's a realtor. My brother's a realtor. My grandfather bought about 46 apartments, in what make up like two apartment buildings years and years ago in the early 80s. And yeah, I mean, to keep those, my family still owns them. My parents added more real estate to their own portfolio, and then that will pass on. My wife and I, again, have believed in that and have done it as well. So yeah, I mean but that's it. I think the word that I want to give to the audience is intentionality. There has to be an intentionality to to whatever it is you're going to build. Whether again it's a media company, real estate empire, and I use that term very loosely. We do not have a real estate empire, but the idea is that you
yeah,
could, and we don't think like that as Christians. The dispensational movement, and I mean again, theologically, I have tons to say about it, but practically, forget the theology of dispensationalism. The practical damage that dispensationalism has done to American Christianity has been profound.
right,
Because if you think God's coming back next Tuesday, you're building nothing.
right,
Because you don't want to platform yourself. I mean, there's this false humility that goes around in the Christian
yes,
world that is
yes,
so toxically disgusting that I just
right,
want to go, please stop. No, it stop. I don't know who this is for, but
right,
stop. So my encouragement from a practical theological standpoint is, guys, build something that lasts. Leave something. The Bible says very clearly that you are to leave things of value to your children and your children's children. And we always want to take that in the spiritual sense, and you should. That does mean spiritually. Absolutely. Deuteronomy 6 is crystal clear that spiritually that's true. But it's true in more ways than just spiritual. So Marcus, give the people kind of a couple of practical steps here as we close out that you think they could take to help build something, whether it's through lore, which I would love to see them do, or in other practical ways, and then tell the folks how they can find you, whether it's through lore or social media or whatever.
yeah. You can just email me Marcus at lore.tv, LOOR.tv. If you have any questions, but I think the one thing I really want to emphasize is one first thing is, you have the church sphere, the family sphere, and the state sphere.
Yep.
And we have somehow put the business in the realm of which is in the realm of the family, or if you're, I think it's Kuiper made it its own separate sphere. But whatever that, however you group that, the business is not in the church sphere. So all of our businesses that we try to do is in the church sphere, and it's stupid and dumb and fake and gay, and that needs to stop. Like that needs to stop. It's okay to make businesses to serve the church and do that. Like that's totally fine. But if you don't need to make Christian pencils. You just need to make good pencils, right?
Yeah.
So stop trying to do that. It's actually very Gnostic, I would say, to do that.
Testaments that are actual
Yeah,
breath mints. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's actually very Gnostic because you're saying that, a testament is somehow more spiritual or holy than a regular
A
mint.
tic tac. Yeah.
Yeah, Tic Tac, right? Like it's ridiculous. So stop doing that. And then the second thing is just like I want to say this with urgency. I spend a lot of time. We're building a brand for Gen Z, an entertainment brand for Gen Z. I like to say we're MTV for Barron Trump and his friends, right? Like that's what we're building. We have to build this now. Everything is in place. The audience is there. They're going to find their entertainment somewhere, and they don't have it yet. It's not TikTok and YouTube like people think. I'm talking about like actual global entertainment brands for this generation. Like there needs to be something now. Like the urgency is now, and we have an opportunity to really build that out immediately, or we can just wait and let some other pagan do it, and that'll be disastrous. But with the conservative movement, with Gen Z's hatred and repulsion of pornography and gooning and all that sort of stuff, like just the way Gen Z is moving, they're rebelling against three awful generations of boomers, Gen X's, and millennials, and the response to that rebellion, that punk rock, that hippie movement is conservatism. So everything's in place for us to really capitalize and be profitable on this generation, but also take ownership of this generation, which is what I fear, based on conversations I've had with people, is that there's still this mentality of just build the youth a gymnasium and move them out of worship service. Like, don't take them seriously, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is still the mentality we're up against when you talk about that. It's like, I hear so many times people say, "Oh well, younger people don't spend money." It's like, well, what are you talking? Like, how does Nintendo succeed? Or why do they put cereal aisles on the bottom eye level shelf if 5-year-olds don't have money? Like, it's such a stupid, bankrupt position to think I'm not going to invest in younger people because they don't have the money. Like it's nonsense. McDonald's completely changed their entire business by making kids beg their parents for Happy Meals, right? Like it was and they became the biggest toy manufacturer in the world by doing that, right? Like so, but kids don't have money, right? So we have to get rid of that, and we have to invest and start building brands and entertainment that appeals to a broad generation of people, or else we're going to lose it. It's going to be our fault again. And so there's a reason conservative influencers complain about the conservative way of viewing media and arts and entertainment, because it's a real problem on the investment front. Daily Wire said we're going to take $100 million and we're going to invest in Boomer Media. Well, Hollywood never does that. Hollywood always spends money on the college age demographic. That's their prime audience. Everything they do, from Cartoon Network to Nickelodeon to MTV, Comedy Central, every major cable network that still existed was a male college oriented demographic. It wasn't a movies for boomers. It wasn't like it's not how you build out culture and generations. And Hollywood knows that. But we're still having to convince people of that. And I think the church should be, the Christians in the church should be some of the first to actually think that way. But you don't think that way, as you said, if you're rapture minded, right? Like during the '90s rapture boom, where everybody was buying Left Behind books, the left was developing LLMs and AI, right? And so for 20 or 30 years down the road. They're building stuff that technology can't do, and they know the technology can't do it, but they're still building that stuff out. So that would be my advice: is if you have capital, start building stuff now.
Yeah.
That's with a plan to last 40 to 80 to 100 years. So
Well, man, that's wonderful advice. I hope you guys that are watching have gotten some value from this. I have thoroughly enjoyed my conversation. So I want to thank my guest, Marcus Pittman, for being here today. And of course, to all of you that watch and support what we do here at Civically Minded, I'm grateful for each of you. I really do. Appreciate it. There'd be no channel without you. So as we try to build something that is appreciated and enjoyed by people who want to watch it, um, I learned quite a bit today too. So thank you, Marcus. What an incredible amount of stuff to chew on, for your knowledge of an industry that for so many Christians is elusive and almost toxic and off limits. I appreciate the time and effort that you've put in to understanding that world and trying to say we can do this, and I think we can even do it better. So that's really really encouraging. So if you like the content, share it, of course, subscribe. And until next time, remember, I'm your host, Corey Wing. Be brave, be bold, be civically minded. God bless.